Alright, before we dive into today's sci-fi madness, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It's quick, it's free, and it means you won't miss any of the wild stories we've got coming your way. The emergency klaxon screamed through orbital station Nexus 91 as atmosphere leaked from hull breach sector 12, creating a whistling death song that made every being aboard question their life choices. Sparks cascaded from severed power conduits while emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red, transforming the pristine diplomatic facility into something resembling a war zone. 23 casualties lay scattered across the main corridor, their various alien anatomies twisted in ways that suggested the structural collapse had been both sudden and merciless. Dr. Vecnar Othkal, the station's chief Zephyrian medical officer, stood frozen in the chaos, his forearms trembling as he consulted his holographic medical protocols. His species had perfected healing arts over millennia, developing techniques so advanced that they bordered on miraculous provided everything went according to established procedures. Unfortunately, disasters rarely followed medical textbooks. Sterilization field generators are offline, announced his assistant, a nervous Zephyrian whose voice cracked under pressure. Environmental controls are fluctuating. We cannot maintain proper surgical conditions. The wounded groaned and bled while the medical team debated contamination protocols. A Kytherian diplomat clutched his shattered thorax, purple blood pooling beneath him as his breathing became increasingly labored. 3 other species lay in various states of trauma, their alien physiologies presenting challenges that required careful study and consultation. Mason Carter watched this medical paralysis from his position near the security checkpoint, his marine dress uniform somehow still crisp despite the carnage surrounding them. As the human security escort assigned to protect Ambassador Elena Vasquez during these peace negotiations, he'd seen enough combat to recognize when hesitation killed more effectively than any weapon. "Doc, that blue guy over there is going into shock," Mason called out, pointing toward the Kytherian diplomat. "His breathing's getting shallow and his skin's changing color." Dr. Othkal glanced up from his holographic protocols, his expression mixing confusion with mild irritation. "Security personnel should maintain their positions during medical emergencies. We have trained professionals handling this situation." Mason's jaw tightened as he watched the Kytherian's condition deteriorate. The alien's breathing had become rapid and shallow, classic signs of traumatic shock that would kill him within minutes if left untreated. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian medical team continued their debate about proper sterilization procedures. "Look, I've got field medical training," Mason said, stepping closer to the wounded. "Maybe I can help while you guys figure out your equipment situation." The suggestion caused Dr. Othkal's 4 eyes to widen in what appeared to be horror. "Absolutely not. Human medical practices are crude and primitive. Your species still uses invasive procedures and barbaric techniques that civilized medicine abandoned centuries ago." "Barbaric techniques?" Mason's voice carried an edge that made several aliens step back. "You mean the kind that actually save lives?" A young Zephyrian medical student whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "I studied human medicine in xenobiology class. They still cut into bodies with metal instruments and use chemical compounds to alter biological functions. It's fascinating from an anthropological perspective." Dr. Othkal nodded gravely. "Precisely. Their methods are violent and unrefined. They lack the sophistication of modern healing techniques." Mason knelt beside the dying Kytherian diplomat, whose purple blood had spread across the deck plating. The alien's eyes were glazing over, pupils dilating as his body began shutting down. "This guy's got maybe 3 minutes left. You want to explain to his family that he died because you were worried about my bedside manner?" "Stand away from the patient," Dr. Othkal commanded, his voice rising. "You are not qualified to provide medical assistance. Human field medicine is nothing more than organized butchery." The insult hung in the recycled air like a challenge. Mason's hands clenched into fists before he forced them to relax, reminding himself that punching the chief medical officer wouldn't help anyone. Instead, he reached for the tactical medical kit attached to his belt, a compact package that every Marine carried into combat zones. "Organized butchery," Mason repeated, his tone deadly calm. "That's what you call the medicine that's kept humans alive through wars, plagues, and disasters for thousands of years?" He opened the kit, revealing an array of instruments and supplies that looked primitive compared to the sleek alien medical devices scattered around the corridor. Compression bandages, hemostatic powder, emergency sutures, and chemical pain relievers, tools that had evolved through necessity rather than academic theory. Dr. Oathcall recoiled as if Mason had drawn a weapon. Those implements are archaic. The risk of infection alone would be catastrophic. We cannot permit such dangerous interventions. Dangerous? Mason's laugh held no humor. What's dangerous is letting people die while you debate protocol. The Catherian diplomat's breathing had become barely perceptible, his skin fading from deep purple to a sickly gray. Mason could see the exact moment when academic medicine would become academic autopsy, and he'd witnessed enough preventable deaths to know he couldn't stand by and watch another one. "I'm going to treat him," Mason announced, pulling on disposable gloves from his kit. "You can document it as evidence of human savagery if that makes you feel better." Several aliens gasped as Mason began his assessment, checking pulse points and examining wounds with practiced efficiency. His movements were quick but controlled, guided by training that emphasized speed over perfection when lives hung in the balance. "This is unconscionable," Dr. Oathcall protested, but he made no move to physically stop the human. "You're contaminating the patient with primitive contact techniques." Mason ignored the commentary as he located the source of the Catherian's internal bleeding, a punctured vessel that was slowly draining the alien's life away. He reached for a hemostatic agent from his kit, a chemical compound that would seal the wound through controlled coagulation. "What is that substance?" the Zephyrian medical student asked, leaning closer despite his superior's disapproval. "Something that stops bleeding," Mason replied, applying the powder to the wound site. "We call it practical medicine." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Catherian's bleeding slowed to a trickle, then stopped entirely as the hemostatic agent formed a temporary seal. Mason followed up with pressure bandages and began treating the alien for shock, elevating his legs and monitoring vital signs with instruments that looked ancient compared to alien technology but produced undeniably effective results. Dr. Oathcall watched in stunned silence as the dying diplomat's condition stabilized, his breathing becoming stronger and more regular with each passing minute. But that wasn't the shocking part. The medical bay of orbital station Nexus 91 hummed with tension as thick as the recycled atmosphere, where the most advanced alien healing technologies and three-star systems had just been upstaged by what looked like a human toolbox. Dr. Kiros Valtoth, the Altarian chief medical administrator, stood before a holographic display showing patient vitals that defied every principle of civilized medicine he'd studied for over 2 centuries. "Impossible," he muttered, his crystalline vocal cords creating harmonics that resonated through the chamber. "These readings cannot be accurate." The human marine, Mason Carter, sat calmly in the corner of the medical bay, cleaning blood from his primitive instruments with what appeared to be simple antiseptic wipes. His patient, the Catherian diplomat who should have died from massive internal trauma, was not only alive but showing remarkable improvement under what the Altarians considered barbaric field treatment. Ambassador Xanthi Dorvi of the Hegemony Council swept into the medical bay, her 6-foot frame radiating the authority of someone accustomed to having entire star systems hang on her every word. Her species had evolved beyond physical medicine millennia ago, relying instead on bioresonance healing that worked on molecular frequencies rather than crude physical intervention. "Explain to me," she demanded, her voice carrying undertones that made lesser beings instinctively submit, "how a primitive human security guard has achieved better medical outcomes than our most advanced practitioners." Dr. Valtoth's bioluminescent patches flickered with embarrassment. "The human employed techniques that violate every standard of proper medical care, direct tissue manipulation, chemical intervention, and physical compression methods that should have caused massive systemic shock." Mason looked up from his equipment maintenance, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Should have, but didn't. Funny how that works." The casual dismissal sent ripples of shock through the assembled alien medical staff. No one spoke to hegemony officials with such irreverence, especially not members of a species barely advanced enough for interstellar travel. "Your methods are unsophisticated," Ambassador Dorvi stated coldly. "They lack the precision and refinement that characterize truly advanced medical science." "Unsophisticated," Mason repeated, standing to face the towering alien diplomat. "That's an interesting way to describe medicine that actually saves lives when everything else fails." Dr. Valtoth activated a holographic medical scanner, its blue light washing over the recovering Catherian patient. The bio-readings show cellular regeneration occurring at rates far exceeding normal parameters. However, the methods used to achieve this result are crude beyond comprehension. Mason's expression hardened. Crude? Let me tell you something about crude, Doc. Crude is watching someone die because you're too proud to use techniques that work. Crude is letting perfect be the enemy of good when lives are on the line. The medical bay's secondary alarm began chirping, indicating another emergency somewhere on the station. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, they could see rescue shuttles arriving from nearby vessels, their holds filled with casualties from the structural collapse that had damaged 3 adjacent sectors. Incoming wounded, announced the station's AI. Estimated casualties, 47 beings of various species. Medical teams prepare for mass casualty protocol. Doctor. Voltoth immediately began consulting his holographic procedures manual, cross-referencing treatment protocols for different alien physiologies. The process would take approximately 20 minutes to complete, ensuring that each patient received species-appropriate care according to established medical standards. Mason watched the incoming casualty reports with growing frustration. 20 minutes to figure out who gets treated first? These people are going to be dead by the time you finish reading your manual. Proper medical triage requires careful assessment of each patient's physiological requirements, Ambassador Dorvey explained with the patience of someone addressing a particularly slow child. Hasty decisions lead to medical errors that could prove fatal. Hasty decisions? Mason's voice rose with incredulity. Lady, in combat medicine, the only fatal error is taking too long to make any decision at all. The first wave of casualties began arriving on anti-gravity stretchers, their conditions ranging from minor injuries to life-threatening trauma. The alien medical teams immediately began their assessment protocols, scanning each patient with sophisticated diagnostic equipment that provided detailed biological analyses. Mason surveyed the wounded with the practiced eye of someone who'd performed battlefield triage in conditions where hesitation meant death. He could identify the critical cases at a glance: the Zephyrian with the severed artery, the Rigelian showing signs of internal bleeding, the young Altarian whose breathing indicated punctured lung tissue. That one, and that one, he said, pointing to the 3 most critical patients. They need immediate intervention or they won't make it to your fancy diagnostic phase, Doctor. Voltoth looked up from his holographic scanner with obvious irritation. Security personnel are not qualified to make medical assessments. Please maintain your position while trained professionals evaluate these patients. The Zephyrian casualty's vital signs began fluctuating wildly as arterial bleeding continued unchecked. His 4-chambered heart was working overtime to compensate for blood loss, but the effort was rapidly exhausting his cardiovascular system. He's going into hypovolemic shock, Mason observed, recognizing the symptoms from countless battlefield encounters. You've got maybe 5 minutes before his organs start shutting down. Hypovolemic shock requires careful fluid replacement therapy calibrated to Zephyrian physiology, Doctor. Voltoth replied, still consulting his diagnostic equipment. The process cannot be rushed without risking catastrophic complications. Mason watched the patient's condition deteriorate while the medical team debated proper treatment protocols. The alien's skin was turning pale blue, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow as his body struggled to maintain basic functions with insufficient blood volume. This is insane, Mason muttered, reaching for his medical kit. You're going to let him die while you calculate. The perfect solution. Ambassador Dorvey stepped between Mason and the patient, her imposing presence designed to intimidate. Human medical intervention is not permitted. Your species lacks the sophistication to treat advanced alien physiologies safely. Sophistication, Mason repeated, his tone becoming dangerously quiet. You want to know what's sophisticated? Keeping someone alive when everything goes wrong and you don't have perfect conditions or unlimited time. The Zephyrian's vital signs flatlined on the monitoring equipment, his 4 hearts finally succumbing to the blood loss that could have been stopped with immediate intervention. What happened next made galactic history, and not in a good way. The observation deck of orbital station Nexus 9-1 had become an impromptu war room where the galaxy's most respected medical authorities gathered to witness something that challenged everything they believed about healing. Dr. Malanuk Zahar, the renowned Vorthan xenobiologist whose research had revolutionized interspecies medicine, stood before a massive holographic display showing comparative mortality statistics that made his tentacles writhe with disbelief. "These numbers are unprecedented," he announced to the assembled council of alien physicians, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose career had just been fundamentally shaken. In the past 6 hours, the human has achieved a survival rate of 89% among critical casualties, while our combined efforts have managed only 62%. The silence that followed was deafening. These were beings who had spent centuries perfecting their medical arts, developing technologies that could rebuild organs at the molecular level and cure diseases that had once decimated entire civilizations. Yet a single human with what appeared to be a primitive emergency kit was consistently outperforming them all. Mason Carter leaned against the viewport, watching rescue operations continue in the debris field outside, while alien medical teams struggled to process the implications of their professional humiliation. His uniform was stained with the blood of a dozen different species, each one a life saved through techniques these advanced beings considered barbaric. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Shalvek-Zar, a elderly Nexarian whose species had abandoned physical medicine in favor of psychic healing, "the human success is merely statistical anomaly. Primitive methods occasionally produce favorable outcomes through random chance." Mason turned from the viewport, his expression carrying the kind of patience that combat veterans reserve for explaining obvious truths to people who'd never seen real danger. "Random chance? Doc, I've been practicing emergency medicine in war zones for 12 years. There's nothing random about knowing which patients can wait and which ones will be dead in 10 minutes. The concept seemed to physically pain the assembled medical authorities. Their entire approach to healing was based on comprehensive analysis, detailed planning, and methodical execution. The idea that effective medicine could be practiced quickly, without perfect conditions or complete information, violated their fundamental understanding of how healing worked. Dr. Zahar activated a three-dimensional medical simulation, showing the treatment sequence Mason had used on the Catherian diplomat. The human's approach bypassed 17 standard diagnostic procedures and employed direct intervention techniques that should have caused severe complications. "Should have," Mason agreed, "but didn't. And that patient is alive because I didn't waste time running tests while he bled out on your nice clean deck." Commander Rylith Unzul of the Galactic Medical Oversight Board materialized via hologram, her presence commanding immediate attention from every being in the room. Her species, the ethereals, had transcended physical form centuries ago but maintained interest in biological medicine as a curiosity from their corporeal past. "This situation requires immediate clarification," she declared, her voice resonating through quantum frequencies that bypassed normal audio systems. "How can primitive human medicine consistently outperform the most advanced healing technologies in known space?" Mason straightened, recognizing authority when he saw it, even in holographic form. "Ma'am, with respect, maybe your definition of advanced needs some adjustment. Just because something's complicated doesn't mean it's better." The suggestion that their medical superiority might be an illusion sent shockwaves through the assembled aliens. These were species that had conquered death itself in many cases, developing treatments that could restore youth, regenerate lost limbs, and cure genetic disorders at the cellular level. "Human medicine is crude," insisted Dr. Zar, his psychic emanations betraying his growing desperation. "Your techniques involve physical cutting, chemical poisoning, and mechanical manipulation of biological systems." "Crude but effective," Mason replied calmly. "We learned our medicine in places where people die if you take too long, being elegant about it. Every technique I use has been tested under the worst possible conditions." Dr. Zahar pulled up historical records of human medical development, his tentacles dancing over holographic controls as centuries of data flowed past. "Fascinating. Human medical advancement appears to have been driven primarily by warfare, natural disasters, and epidemic diseases." The revelation struck the assembled aliens like a physical blow. Their own medical sciences had developed in controlled environments, with unlimited resources and careful study. They had never been forced to make life or death decisions under pressure.
Thanks for sticking around
Never
until
had
the
to
end.
choose between
Don't
perfect
forget to
treatment and
subscribe.
immediate
I've got
action.
plenty more stories
Your
coming,
species has
and
been
each
practicing
one is
combat
stranger
medicine
than the
for
last.
millennia, Commander Unzul observed her, quantum voice carrying notes of dawning comprehension. "While we perfected healing in ideal conditions, humans learned to save lives when everything goes wrong." Mason nodded grimly. "Every human medic trains for disasters. We assume the power will fail, supplies will run out, and conditions will be terrible. Because that's when people need us most." The medical bay's emergency alert system activated again, announcing another wave of casualties from a secondary structural collapse. This time, however, The alien medical teams hesitated, looking uncertainly at their sophisticated equipment and comprehensive protocols. 43 incoming wounded, the station AI reported. Multiple species, various trauma types, estimated arrival in 8 minutes. Doctor? Czar looked at his diagnostic equipment, then at Mason's simple medical kit. His internal conflict visible in the way his tentacles coiled and uncoiled. Human Carter, would you? Would you consider demonstrating your triage methods? The request was unprecedented. These beings had spent centuries convinced of their medical superiority, and now they were asking a primitive human to teach them battlefield medicine. Triage isn't about having the best equipment, Mason explained, moving toward the medical bay. It's about making fast, accurate decisions when lives depend on speed. You sort patients into 3 categories: those who'll survive without immediate help, those who need treatment right now, and those who are beyond saving. The concept of deliberately not treating certain patients horrified the alien physicians, whose medical ethics required them to attempt saving every life regardless of resources or probability of success. You abandon patients? Doctor, Czar asked, his psychic emanations radiating shock. I save the ones I can save, Mason corrected. Sometimes that means making hard choices, but it's better to save 10 lives and lose 2 than to lose all 12 trying to save everyone perfectly. The first casualties began arriving, and for the first time in their medical careers, the galaxy's most advanced physicians found themselves learning from someone they'd dismissed as primitive. And then the alarms started. The catastrophic failure of Station Nexus 91's primary life support systems turned the diplomatic facility into a death trap, where oxygen levels plummeted and emergency power flickered like dying stars. In the chaos of cascading system failures, the most technologically advanced medical minds in 3 galaxies found themselves facing their greatest challenge, yet learning humility from a species they had dismissed as medically primitive. Dr. Zoran Kaitek, the prestigious Helix Confederation's Minister of Medical Sciences, clutched his portable atmospheric processor while watching Mason Carter work miracles with nothing more than determination and a field medic's training. The irony wasn't lost on him that their sophisticated life support equipment was failing while the humans' simple techniques continued saving lives in increasingly impossible conditions. Atmospheric pressure dropping to critical levels announced the station's failing AI system, its voice distorting as power fluctuations affected even basic communications. All personnel must evacuate within 36 minutes or face respiratory failure. The evacuation orders should have been simple to execute, but 43 wounded beings couldn't be moved without stabilizing their conditions first. The alien medical team stood paralyzed by the complexity of the situation, their advanced healing technologies requiring stable environmental conditions that no longer existed. Mason surveyed the medical bay with the cold calculation of someone who'd performed emergency medicine in collapsing buildings, sinking ships, and burning aircraft. We need to get the critical cases ready for transport first. Everyone else gets basic stabilization and moves to the evacuation shuttles. Impossible. Doctor? Kaitek protested, his breathing apparatus hissing as it struggled to filter the deteriorating atmosphere. Several patients require intensive monitoring and cannot survive transport without full life support systems. They can't survive staying here either, Mason pointed out, already moving toward the most critical patient, a young Nexarian whose complex respiratory system was failing in the thinning atmosphere. Sometimes your only choice is between bad options and worse options. The human's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he improvised solutions that would have horrified medical school instructors across the galaxy. He jury-rigged a portable ventilation system using emergency oxygen canisters and surgical tubing, creating a life support device that looked primitive but functioned when the sophisticated alien equipment had failed. Dr. Vazet Akor, the Centaurian medical prodigy whose innovations had earned him recognition throughout civilized space, watched in fascination as Mason demonstrated techniques that prioritized function over form. Your methods appear crude, yet they achieve results under conditions where our advanced systems prove inadequate. That's the point, Mason replied, securing the improvised breathing apparatus to his patient. Human medicine evolved to work when everything else breaks down. We don't get the luxury of perfect conditions. The station shuddered as another support structure failed, sending debris cascading through the corridors and causing several alien physicians to panic. Their medical training had never prepared them for practicing healing arts while their environment literally collapsed around them. Mason's voice cut through the chaos with military authority. Doctor, Kitek, grab that plasma coagulator and help me stop this bleeding. Dr. Akor, I need you to monitor vitals on the 3 patients by the viewport. Everyone else, start preparing the walking wounded for immediate evacuation. The aliens hesitated, unused to taking orders from someone they considered medically inferior. But as the station's life support systems continued failing and their sophisticated equipment became increasingly useless, they found themselves following the humans' directions. This is unprecedented, Dr. Kitek muttered as he applied pressure to a wound using techniques that his medical training had taught him were obsolete. We are practicing medicine like, like it matters more than looking sophisticated, Mason finished, his attention focused on stabilizing a patient whose alien physiology was shutting down in the deteriorating atmosphere. Welcome to combat medicine, Doc. The evacuation shuttles began docking with the station, their pilots reporting that they could only maintain position for limited time due to the debris field and structural instability. Every minute of delay meant risking not just the patients' lives, but the lives of everyone still aboard the failing station. Dr. Zyvex Zinthra, the elderly Vorthan whose research had defined modern xenobiology, approached Mason with something resembling reverence. Human Carter, I must ask, how does your species train physicians to make such rapid decisions under extreme pressure? Mason paused in his work, looking up at the alien whose species had achieved medical miracles that humans could barely comprehend. We don't train them in lecture halls, Doc. We throw them into emergency rooms, disaster zones, and battlefields. They learn to save lives when everything's going wrong because that's when people need saving most. The concept revolutionized everything the assembled aliens thought they knew about medical education. Their training involved years of theoretical study, controlled laboratory conditions, and careful supervision. The idea of learning medicine through crisis and chaos was simultaneously terrifying and enlightening. Your entire medical philosophy is based on worst-case scenarios, Dr. Zinthra observed, her voice carrying newfound respect. While we perfected healing in ideal conditions, your species prepared for disaster. Because disaster is when medicine matters most, Mason confirmed, helping load the last critical patient onto an evacuation stretcher. Anyone can practice medicine when everything's working perfectly. The real test comes when nothing's working and people are dying anyway. The final evacuation shuttle departed Station Nexus 91 just as the main reactor began its emergency shutdown sequence, leaving the diplomatic facility as a drifting hulk in space, but every being aboard those shuttles was alive, including dozens who would have died under conventional alien medical protocols. In the shuttle's cramped medical bay, Dr. Kitek composed his official report to the Galactic Medical Council, his words carrying the weight of a fundamental paradigm shift that would echo across civilized space for generations. Today we learned that medical advancement is not measured by technological sophistication alone, he dictated to his recording device. The human species has achieved something we believed impossible. They have mastered the art of healing under the worst possible conditions. Their medicine is not primitive. It is battle-tested, disaster-proven, and designed for the chaos of real emergencies. He paused, watching Mason treat patients with equipment that looked ancient compared to alien technology but worked when everything else failed. We have been wrong about human medicine. They are not crude, they are combat-ready. And perhaps it is time we learned from them. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Don't forget to subscribe. I've got plenty more stories coming, and each one is stranger than the last.